In the winter of 1944, the Madrid to A Coruña railway line cut through the El Bierzo region of northwestern Spain with mechanical precision. This was not a gentle landscape. The Montes de León rose sharply from the plains of Old Castile, their slopes steep and unforgiving. The railway engineers who designed the line decades earlier had understood the difficulty of this terrain. They built 21 tunnels through the mountains, numbered sequentially, each one a passage through solid rock. The work had been dangerous. The gradient was severe. The descent from the highlands toward Torre del Bierzo required constant vigilance from train crews, especially in winter, when moisture collected on the rails and brake shoes wore down faster than usual. The tunnels themselves were narrow. They had been designed for single-track operation, with passing loops at stations to allow trains traveling in opposite directions to cross safely. This required precise coordination between station masters, signalmen, and train crews. The system depended on communication, on telephone lines strung along the tracks, on clear signals, on strict adherence to schedules. When a train was late, the entire sequence of operations had to be adjusted. Station masters had to notify each other, signals had to be reset, trains had to be held or diverted. The margin for error was small. Torre del Bierzo was a village of modest size, built around the railway station. The station itself was functional rather than grand. It had the necessary facilities, a ticket office, a waiting room, a platform, and the station master's office with its telegraph equipment and telephone. The station master in 1944 was a man who understood his responsibilities. He knew the schedules by heart. He knew which trains were passenger expresses and which were freight. He knew the condition of the line, the placement of signals, the location of every tunnel and passing loop in his section. His job was not complicated in theory, but it required constant attention. A single mistake could have consequences. The line through El Bierzo was busy during the war years. Spain was officially neutral during the Second World War, but the country was still recovering from its own civil war, which had ended only 5 years earlier. General Franco's regime controlled the railways through Renfe, the National Railway Company. Censorship was strict. Information was controlled. When accidents occurred, the official response was measured and minimal. The public was told only what the government decided they needed to know. This approach to information would become important later. The route itself presented continuous challenges. Trains descending from the highlands toward Torre del Bierzo faced a gradient that tested their braking systems. Steam locomotives of the era relied on mechanical brakes that operated through friction. Brake shoes pressed against the wheels. Sand was scattered on the rails to increase traction. Hand brakes on individual carriages could be applied by railway staff walking through the train. But all of these systems generated heat. Brake shoes wore down. Axle boxes could overheat. In winter, with heavy passenger loads and limited visibility, the descent became a calculated exercise in controlled deceleration. Train crews were trained for this. They understood the physics involved, but understanding and execution were not always the same thing. Tunnel number 20 lay just beyond Torre del Bierzo station, heading west. It was one of the longer tunnels on the line, carved through solid rock, unlit except for the lamps on passing trains. The interior walls were dark with soot from decades of coal smoke. Water seeped through cracks in the stone, collecting in small pools along the track bed. The air inside was cold and stagnant. When a train entered, the sound became immense, amplified by the confined space. The hiss of steam, the metallic rhythm of wheels on rails, the grinding of brake shoes, all of it echoed and multiplied until it was difficult to distinguish individual sounds. Visibility was reduced to whatever the locomotive's headlamp could illuminate, and that was not much. Engineers relied on their knowledge of the route, their sense of speed and distance. They could not see what was ahead. They could only proceed and trust that the line was clear. The Christmas season of 1943 brought increased passenger traffic. People traveled to visit family, to attend markets and fairs, to conduct business before the new year. The trains were crowded. Many passengers traveled without tickets, boarding at small stations or climbing aboard at stops where the ticket office was closed. This was not unusual. The economy was constrained. People moved when they needed to move, with or without proper documentation. Renfe's official passenger counts were approximations at best. When a train left Madrid bound for Galicia, the company knew how many tickets had been sold, but not how many people were actually aboard. This gap in data would later become significant. On the evening of January 2, 1944, the Galicia Passenger Express departed Madrid at 8:30 in the evening. It consisted of 12 carriages hauled by two Mastodon-class steam locomotives. These were large machines, built for power rather than speed, each one weighing over 100 tons. The train was already running 2 hours behind schedule when it left the capital. Delays were common during winter months. Snow on the tracks, mechanical issues, increased passenger boarding times. All of these factors accumulated. The train crew knew they were late. They also knew that other trains on the line were operating on schedules that assumed their express would arrive at stations on time. Every minute of delay created complications further down the line. The descent through Brenuelas began after Astorga. This was the steepest section of the route. The gradient was severe enough that trains required full braking power to maintain safe speeds. The Galicia Express, now hauled by a single locomotive and already experiencing brake problems, began the descent anyway. The brake shoes were applied continuously. The wheels generated heat. The smell of hot metal filled the air inside the carriages. Passengers could feel the train's speed increasing on the downward slope, then the shudder as brakes were applied, then the slow acceleration again as the gradient pulled them forward. This cycle repeated throughout the descent. The train was scheduled to stop at Albares, a small station near the bottom of the grade. Stopping would allow the brakes to cool. It would also allow railway staff to inspect the train and assess whether it was safe to continue. But the train did not stop at Albares. The Albares station master stood on the platform in the early afternoon of January 3rd and watched the Galicia Express approach from the east. He could hear it before he saw it. The sound of a train under heavy braking is distinct. The mechanical screaming of brake shoes against wheels, the hiss of escaping steam, the grinding vibration that travels through the rails and into the ground. The train should have been slowing. It should have been decelerating smoothly toward the platform. Instead, it accelerated through the station with its whistle blowing continuously, a long, unbroken wail that meant emergency. The station master understood immediately. The train had lost its brakes. He ran to his office and seized the telephone. The next station down the line was Torre del Bierzo, approximately 6 kilometers away. The descent between Albares and Torre del Bierzo was not as steep as the Brenuelas section, but it was not level either. A runaway train would continue to accelerate. The station master at Torre del Bierzo answered the telephone. The message was brief and direct. The express had passed through Albares without stopping. The brakes had failed. The train was accelerating. There was no way to stop it before it reached Torre del Bierzo, and beyond Torre del Bierzo lay tunnel number 20. The station master at Torre del Bierzo received this information at approximately 13:15 in the afternoon. He had less than 5 minutes to act. The express would cover the 6 kilometers in that time, possibly less. He understood what needed to be done, and he understood that it was probably impossible to do it. He ran from his office onto the platform. Railway staff were present, as they always were during operational hours. He shouted instructions. The line had to be cleared. Any trains in the station or approaching the station had to be warned. Sleepers, the heavy wooden ties that supported the rails, had to be placed on the tracks to slow the runaway train. But there was not enough time. There was never going to be enough time. At that moment, a shunting engine was inside tunnel number 20. It had been working in the Torre del Bierzo yards, moving carriages from one track to another. When the station master learned about the runaway express, he immediately sent word to the shunting engine crew. They had to get out of the tunnel. The shunting engine was coupled to 3 carriages. It began moving, heading west through the tunnel, away from the approaching express. The tunnel was over 1 kilometer long. The shunting engine could not move quickly while hauling 3 carriages on a slight upward grade. The crew knew this. They also knew that somewhere behind them, traveling at high speed, was a 12-carriage passenger express with failed brakes. The interior of tunnel number 20 was exactly as it had always been: dark, cold, the walls slick with moisture. The sound of the shunting engine echoed off the stone surfaces, a rhythmic, mechanical chugging that filled the confined space. The crew could see only what their lamp illuminated, which was not much. They could not see behind them. They could not see the entrance to the tunnel. They could only move forward and hope that they would clear the tunnel before the express entered. But they did not clear it. The Galicia Express entered tunnel number 20 at speed. The exact speed is not recorded, but witnesses later described the sound. It was not the sound of a train under control. It was the sound of a machine in the final stages of mechanical failure, all brakes applied and all systems overheating. The wheels no longer decelerating, but simply enduring the friction as the train's mass and momentum carried it forward. The whistle continued to blow. Inside the tunnel, the sound became overwhelming. The passengers in the carriages could see nothing outside the windows. They could only hear the noise and feel the train's speed and know that something was very wrong. Many of them had been traveling since the previous evening. They were tired. Some were asleep. Some were standing in the corridors because the carriages were overcrowded. None of them could do anything to change what was about to happen. The collision occurred approximately 13:20 in the afternoon. The express struck the rear carriages of the shunting engine's train while both were still inside the tunnel. The impact was catastrophic. The last 2 carriages of the shunting engine's train were still fully inside tunnel number 20 when they were hit. The force of the collision crushed them instantly. The express did not stop. Its momentum carried it forward into the wreckage. The first 6 carriages of the express, those closest to the locomotive, were telescoped together. Wood splintered, metal twisted. The gas lighting system, which used pressurized gas stored in tanks beneath the carriages, ruptured. The gas ignited immediately. Fire in a confined space behaves differently than fire in open air. Inside the tunnel, the flames spread rapidly through the wreckage of the first 6 carriages. The wood used in the carriage construction was old and dry. It burned quickly. The passengers trapped inside had no means of escape. The windows were small, the doors were blocked by wreckage or by the press of other passengers trying to flee. The smoke filled the tunnel within minutes, thick and black and toxic. Those who were not killed in the initial collision were overcome by smoke or burned. The fire generated intense heat. The tunnel's stone walls absorbed some of it, but not enough. The temperature inside the tunnel rose to levels that made approach impossible. The shunting engine crew, by chance, survived the initial collision. Their locomotive was at the front of their small train, ahead of the 3 carriages. When the express struck the rear carriages, the shunting engine was jolted forward violently, but remained on the rails. The crew could not see what had happened behind them, but they understood. They continued moving forward, desperate to exit the tunnel and reach safety. They emerged from the western end of tunnel number 20 at approximately 13:25 in the afternoon. Behind them, the tunnel was filled with fire and smoke and death. What they did not know, and what no one at Torre del Bierzo station yet knew, was that a 3rd train was approaching. A coal train hauling 27 loaded wagons was heading east from the opposite direction. It had departed from its origin point on schedule and was approaching tunnel number 21, which lay just west of tunnel number 20. The coal train crew had received no warning. The signaling system, which controlled track occupancy and train movements, had been destroyed in the collision. When the express struck the shunting engine's carriages, the impact severed the telegraph and telephone cables that ran along the tracks. The signals ahead of the coal train showed clear. The crew had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. The coal train entered tunnel number 21 and proceeded through it normally. When it emerged from the eastern end, the crew saw the shunting engine ahead on the tracks. The shunting engine crew was waving frantically, trying to warn them. The coal train crew applied their brakes immediately, but 27 loaded wagons traveling on level track carry enormous momentum. The coal train slowed, but it could not stop in time. It collided with the shunting engine at reduced speed. The impact was not as violent as the first collision, but it was sufficient. The shunting engine driver was killed instantly. 4 railway men on the coal train were also killed. The shunting engine derailed. The front wagons of the coal train left the rails and overturned. At Torre del Bierzo station, the station master and his staff could see smoke rising from the area of tunnel number 20. They could not see inside the tunnel. They could not approach it. The fire was too intense. They could only wait and watch as black smoke poured from both ends of the tunnel and rose into the afternoon sky. The fire inside tunnel number 20 burned for 48 hours. This is not an approximate figure. Witnesses recorded the duration carefully. From the afternoon of January 3rd to the afternoon of January 5th, the tunnel remained inaccessible. The temperature inside was too high. The smoke was too thick. The structural integrity of the wreckage was unknown. Railway staff and emergency responders assembled at both ends of the tunnel, but no one could enter. They could only stand at the tunnel mouths and watch the smoke emerge and wait for the fire to exhaust itself. During those 2 days, nothing was recovered from inside. No survivors emerged. No bodies were brought out. The official response during this period was minimal. Franco's government controlled all information about the accident through strict censorship. Local newspapers were instructed to report only the basic facts. A train accident had occurred near Torre del Bierzo. Casualties were expected. Investigations were underway. No journalists were permitted to visit the site. No photographs were released. The families of passengers on the Galicia Express were told to wait for official notification. Many of them traveled to Torre del Bierzo anyway, gathering at the station, asking for information that no one could provide. They were told the same thing repeatedly. The tunnel was still burning. Nothing could be done until the fire was out. They should return home and wait. When the fire finally subsided on January 5th, recovery efforts began. The conditions inside the tunnel were documented by the railway workers who entered. The heat had been intense enough to warp metal and crack stone. The wooden carriages had burned almost completely, leaving only the metal frames and wheel assemblies. The bodies of the victims were difficult to identify. Many had been burned beyond recognition. Others were found clustered near the carriage doors, where passengers had attempted to escape. The recovery teams worked methodically, removing remains, cataloging what they found, attempting to match victims with the passenger manifests. But the manifests were incomplete. Many passengers had traveled without tickets. There was no comprehensive record of who had been aboard the train. The official death toll, announced several days after the accident, was 78. This figure was based on the bodies that had been identified and the passenger tickets that had been sold. RENFE, the National Railway Company, accepted this number as accurate. The government accepted it as well. 78 deaths was a significant tragedy, but it was a finite number. It was something that could be reported, acknowledged, and then moved past. The families of the identified victims received official notification. The bodies were returned for burial. Compensation was discussed, though the amounts were modest and the process was slow. But there were problems with the official count. Survivors from the rear carriages of the express, the ones that had not burned, reported that the train had been severely overcrowded. They described corridors packed with standing passengers, compartments filled beyond capacity, people sitting on luggage in the vestibules between carriages. Some witnesses estimated that the train had been carrying twice as many passengers as the official ticket count suggested. Others placed the number even higher. The villagers of Torre del Bierzo remembered that the train had been traveling during the Christmas market season, when passenger traffic was always at its peak. They remembered how many people had been gathering at the station in the days before the accident, waiting for trains, asking about schedules. The local memory of the event did not align with the official numbers. Over the following years, various estimates emerged. Some historians suggested the death toll might have been as high as 200. Others placed it at 500 or more. The Guinness Book of Rail Facts and Feats, published in 1971, listed the Torre del Bierzo disaster as one of the worst railway accidents in history, with an estimated death toll between 500 and 800. But these were estimates, not confirmed figures. The official Renfe file on the disaster, which would have contained detailed records of the recovery operation, passenger manifests, and investigative findings, was lost. The files simply disappeared from the railway company's archives. Without it, there was no way to verify the true number of victims. The cause of the accident was officially attributed to brake failure. This was accurate as far as it went. The Galicia Express had lost its brakes on the descent through Branuelas. The decision to continue operating the train despite known brake problems was questioned, but not extensively. The railway crew had followed their training. They had attempted to stop at Albares. When that failed, they had used the train's whistle to warn stations ahead. The station master at Torre del Bierzo had attempted to clear the line. Everyone involved had done what they were supposed to do, within the constraints of the situation. The system had simply failed. Mechanical failures happened. This was understood. The official investigation concluded that while the accident was tragic, it was also unavoidable given the circumstances. But there were elements that did not appear in the official report. The maintenance records for the Galicia Express, particularly regarding its braking system, were not made public. The decision-making process that led to the train continuing its journey after the problems were discovered at Astorga was not examined in detail. The staffing levels and training procedures for railway crews on the Madrid to A Coruña line were not reviewed. The adequacy of the signaling system and communication protocols between stations were not questioned. The accident was treated as an isolated incident rather than a potential indication of systemic problems. The physical site of the accident was altered within a few years. Tunnel number 20 remained in use after the wreckage was cleared, but it was never popular with railway crews. Those who had to operate trains through it reported that the tunnel felt different after the accident. The walls were still stained black, though whether from the fire or from decades of accumulated coal smoke, no one could say with certainty. The air inside seemed heavier. The sound of trains echoed strangely. In 1985, 41 years after the accident, Tunnel number 20 was permanently closed. The official reason given was geological instability. The rock surrounding the tunnel had shifted over time, creating structural concerns. The closure was presented as a routine maintenance decision, unrelated to the accident. The railway line was rerouted slightly and a new tunnel was constructed nearby. The old tunnel number 20 was sealed at both ends with concrete barriers. The village of Torre del Bierzo continued to function as it always had. The railway station remained operational. Trains passed through regularly, though they no longer entered the sealed tunnel. The villagers who had witnessed the accident or participated in the recovery efforts gradually aged and passed away. The memories became second-hand, then third-hand. By the early 2000s, most residents of Torre del Bierzo knew that a railway accident had occurred somewhere nearby decades earlier, but the details were vague. The tunnel was closed, the exact location was unmarked, there were no memorials, no plaques, no official recognition of what had happened there. In 2002, a short documentary film about the accident was produced. It was titled simply Tunnel Number 20. The film was researched carefully, using survivor testimony, archival records, and interviews with historians. It presented the available evidence about the accident and discussed the discrepancies in the death toll. The film won a Goya Award for Best Short Documentary. It was broadcast once on Spanish television and then largely forgotten. The film is difficult to find now. It exists in archives, but it is not readily accessible to the general public. In 2019, 75 years after the accident, Spanish television produced another documentary. This one was titled El Tren de los Desaparecidos, which translates as The Train of the Disappeared. The title was deliberate. It connected the accident to a broader pattern in Spanish history, the pattern of disappeared persons, of incomplete records, of events that occurred but were never fully acknowledged. The documentary interviewed survivors who were still living, though they were very old by then. It interviewed relatives of victims, people who had spent decades trying to learn what had happened to family members who had boarded the Galicia Express and never arrived. It interviewed historians who had researched the accident and found the same gaps in the official record that had existed since 1944. One of the historians interviewed was Vicente Fernandez Vázquez, who had published a detailed study of the accident in 2019. Fernandez had spent years reviewing available documentation, cross-referencing testimony, and attempting to construct an accurate account of what had occurred. His conclusion was that the death toll was approximately 100 persons, significantly higher than the official figure of 78, but much lower than the estimates of 500 or more that had circulated for decades. Fernandez's methodology was careful. He accounted for identified victims, unidentified remains recovered from the tunnel, and credible testimony from survivors about the train's passenger load. His estimate was not definitive, he acknowledged that, but it was based on the best available evidence. What struck Fernandez most during his research was not the difficulty of determining an exact death toll, but the fact that the official file on the accidents had been lost. Railway accidents generated substantial documentation, investigations were conducted, reports were written, records were maintained. The Torre del Bierzo disaster should have produced a comprehensive file. That file should still exist in Renfe's archives, but it did not. It had disappeared. The locomotive involved in the accident was also a subject of interest. One of the two mastodon locomotives that had originally hauled the Galicia Express, the one that had been detached at Astorga due to the overheated axle box, survived. It was eventually retired from service and preserved. It is currently housed in the Catalonia Railway Museum. But there was confusion about the other locomotive, the one that had continued with the train and entered tunnel number 20. According to official records, that locomotive should have been destroyed in the fire or scrapped afterward. But witnesses who examined the locomotive in the Catalonia Museum claimed that it was actually the second locomotive, the one that had been in the accident. They pointed to specific damage patterns and modifications that they believed indicated it had been in a serious collision and fire. Railway historians disputed this. They said the locomotive in the museum was definitively the one removed at Astorga, not the one involved in the collision. The documentation supported this conclusion, but the confusion persisted. If the locomotive in the museum was from the accident, then the documentation was wrong. If the documentation was correct, then the witnesses were mistaken. Either way, there was a gap. Something did not align. The sealed tunnel itself remained closed. No official plans existed to reopen it. The geological issues that had prompted its closure in 1985 were real, or at least they were documented as real. The surrounding rock was unstable. Water infiltration had worsened over the years. The structural integrity of the tunnel could not be guaranteed. These were sufficient reasons to keep it closed. But people in Torre del Bierzo occasionally wondered what was still inside. The wreckage had been cleared in 1944, all of it according to official reports. But the fire had burned so intensely and the recovery operation had been conducted in such difficult conditions, and the documentation was so incomplete that questions remained. Had everything been removed? Were there still remains inside, sealed behind the concrete barriers? No one knew. No one was permitted to investigate. The psychological presence of the accident persisted in ways that were difficult to quantify. Railway workers who operated trains on the rerouted line near Torre del Bierzo did not report anything unusual. They did their jobs professionally. But in private conversations, some of them mentioned that they were glad the old tunnel was closed. They did not elaborate. They simply said they were glad. Residents of Torre del Bierzo did not speak about the accident often, but when they did, there was a certain tone to the conversation. It was not exactly reluctance, but it was not openness either. The accident had happened, people had died. That was acknowledged. But there was a sense that discussing it in detail was somehow inappropriate, not because it was disrespectful to the victims, but because it might reveal things that were better left undiscussed. The Franco regime's policy of censorship had established a particular relationship between official narrative and public memory. Events occurred, but the official version of those events was often simplified, minimized, or adjusted to fit political needs. The Torre del Bierzo accident occurred during this period. The official response was shaped by the government's desire to control information and maintain public order. The death toll was announced as 78. The cause was attributed to mechanical failure. The investigation was completed quickly. The file was archived and then lost. Decades later, when researchers attempted to reconstruct what had actually happened, they found that the official record was inadequate. Too much information was missing. Too many questions could not be answered. The accident had occurred, that was certain, but the full truth of it remained inaccessible. In 2023, 8 decades after the accident, a memorial proposal was discussed by local government officials in Torre del Bierzo. The proposal suggested placing a plaque near the sealed tunnel entrance, acknowledging the accident and honoring the victims. The exact wording of the plaque became a point of discussion. Should it list the official death toll of 78? Should it acknowledge that the true number might be higher? Should it mention the lost Renfe file and the gaps in the historical record? These questions proved difficult to resolve. The memorial proposal remained under consideration. As of now, no plaque has been placed. The trains still run through El Bierzo. The line is operational and well-maintained. Modern locomotives have advanced braking systems. Communication between stations is instantaneous and reliable. The descent through Branuelas is managed with electronic controls and safety protocols that did not exist in 1944. The likelihood of a similar accident occurring now is minimal. Railway technology has improved substantially, but the sealed tunnel remains, marked only by concrete barriers and the absence of rails leading into it. The interior is dark and inaccessible. The temperature inside is unknown. The structural condition is undocumented. No one enters. The tunnel exists in a state of deliberate isolation, separated from the functioning railway system, sealed away from examination. What remains is incomplete knowledge. The accident occurred, the official account exists, but it is insufficient. The true number of victims is unknown. The documentation that would resolve these questions is missing. The physical site is sealed. The memories are second-hand or third-hand. The locomotive may or may not be the one involved. The tunnel may or may not contain something still. These gaps are not accidents themselves. They are the result of decisions made about what to record, what to preserve, what to acknowledge, and what to seal away. The Torre del Bierzo disaster is not forgotten, but it is not fully remembered either. It exists in a space between official history and lived experience, documented but not explained, acknowledged but not examined. The tunnel is closed, the trains continue, the record remains incomplete.